We're going to move right along and bring up Debra Facktor.
Okay.
And we've got a great conversation coming up with Sam Riehn.
Yes, indeed we do.
So apologize for the delay. Let's just turn it over to Sam. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Hey, I'm good.
Welcome,
Can you hear
Sam.
me all right?
We
Now
can hear
we
you
got you.
fine. Absolutely.
Awesome.
So without further ado, Sam of TMGcore, Sam Riehn, thank you for being our gold sponsor today and tomorrow. And we want to let you guys get right into the conversation because everybody wants to hear what Debra has to say.
That's
Thank you,
right.
Debra.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I saw that Lauren was calling from the Millennium Falcon, and I don't have as illustrious as a background. I'm calling from my COVID quarantine. I'm on day 7, so just recovering, and but I wouldn't miss America Future Series for the world. So appreciate you guys having me on. And
Way to play hurt, sir.
Yep. Get well quickly.
I appreciate it. Thank you. But of course, it's my honor to introduce Debra Facktor, and it's a pleasure to speak with you today. Real quick, she is the head of U.S. Space Systems for Airbus U.S. Space and Defense Incorporated, leading Airbus's U.S. Space Systems line of business, focusing on national security, space, and space exploration. She represents Airbus on the board of the Airbus Webb Satellites LLC. Thank you for joining us today, Debra.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Pleasure to be here. And sorry about COVID. Hope you're out of that quarantine soon. It seems to never end or keeps coming back.
That's right. Well, I think I'm on the tail end. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. We're following up a really great panel that was represented from several members of government, and so figured I'd start with asking you how industry can maybe best support government needs. And then we'll get to some Q&A, so definitely please ask your questions, audience. And after I get through a couple questions here, we'll turn to the chat and see what's out there. So I'll start with this. How are you leveraging commercial activities to meet U.S. government needs?
Well, first of all, we've got a lot of exciting times at Airbus U.S. Space and Defense right now, and in particular, flowing from the last panel, in my portfolio on the space side, we are leveraging the investments that Airbus has made in commercial, high volume, small satellite manufacturing. You mentioned the Airbus OneWeb satellite joint venture that we have. I sit on that board. It's down in Florida, and we've been manufacturing the satellites for OneWeb's constellation, their commercial low Earth orbit telecommunications constellation. And as we just announced last week, we're using that same facility with a new or an upgraded, evolved satellite design that we'll be using to support the Space Development Agency, their Transport Layer Tranche 1 with Northrop Grumman as our prime. So it's a perfect example of bringing commercial investment together to meet government needs. Airbus invested in the satellite design early on, along with OneWeb in the original factory. And now we're continuing to invest to expand the capabilities of the factory. And to bring that to a national security mission is a great honor.
That's awesome. And we heard the last group talk a lot about interoperability, and I know a lot in the news lately is, we'll hear the term JADC2, the Joint All-Domain Command and Control. How has industry pivoted to meet these new government requirements for interoperability, and what are you guys doing to support that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because always things need to work with, when you bring new capability in, it has to fit with existing capability, and especially technology or hardware that's in the hands of the warfighter. Back to, there were some comments earlier about responsive launch and responsive space. This has been an area personally that I focused in a lot of my career. And early on, you say, well, you need responsive launch. Well, okay, but you have to have something to launch. So responsive launch means responsive satellites, which means responsive payloads, which means responsive ground and responsive data. and getting that all together to fit into the needs of the warfighter. So I think what industry is doing right now is we are sometimes, I don't know if it's more aware, but we're exposed to a lot of different customers and different capabilities that our customers don't always see what systems they're providing. But when we're working for different customers from the Army and the Navy and the Air Force or Space Force, we can sometimes see those links a little more clearly because we're responding in the actual capability. I think the vision for connecting ground and air and stratosphere and space all together, of course, with maritime as well, and the commercial capabilities is super important. We all are understanding we want common interfaces and easier ways to plug and play, to change systems and missions on orbit, and at the same time, make sure that we have safe data, that we have trusted data, and protect all the different cyber vulnerabilities that we're just becoming more and more aware of every day. And it's not just military systems worried about that, but everyday commercial systems, because we want to be able to trust the information that we get from all of our assets.
That's awesome. You mentioned a lot of customers and a lot of requirements there, but I imagine there's some shared goals too. So, where do you feel like the public and private sectors are doing a good job, and where do you think we could make improvements when it comes to that collaboration and in pursuit of those shared goals?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sam. It's kind of what we live every day. You know, the common denominator is that everybody is really passionate about the mission and understanding threats, that we have a changed geopolitical situation. It's very complex, very global, and we in industry are super supportive of making a difference and supporting all of the needs. I think we're getting better at how we communicate. As your first question about how do you use commercial capability to meet military or government needs, requires a lot of cooperation and communication. You know, it can make assumptions. For example, the government, there's an example of, I won't say which one, but a particular mission that was being looked at, and assumed that an architecture could incorporate many more commercial needs. And a study went on, it was about 2 or 3 years, and they did not talk to industry. And part of that was because the government contracting and legal restrictions were interpreted to say, well, you can't talk to industry. Well, the government was making some assumptions about what that architecture could look like. If you don't talk to industry for 2 or 3 years, you have no idea if that capability is actually going to be there when you need it, because are the people still there? Are the technologies still there? You know, we're changing really fast to meet the dynamics of a commercial market. And if we don't see a demand, we might shift and go somewhere else. And you get this disconnect between assuming, oh, well, commercial's doing it. Well, maybe we went in a totally different direction. Or in the other case, maybe we are completely aligned with capability, but the needs that we assumed on the commercial side were totally different. So I've prepared for the wrong mission. So I'm a huge advocate of government and industry talking more and more is better. And then you can link up, you know, where do you make investments? What capability do I need to preserve? Will the supply chain still be there? And particularly my workforce. You know, it's everybody wants to be excited about what they do and to be able to see a future.
That's excellent. I certainly want to dig more into the workforce piece of it, but real quick, we were talking about collaboration. I wanted to ask another question of how are you inserting small business into, you know, how does small business work with Airbus Space Systems?
Yeah, good. Coming from your background in small business, a good question. And actually, I've been involved in a couple small businesses in my past as a leader and an owner. So we use small businesses in our supply chain. And so thinking about the manufacturing side in our particularly on the manufacturing down in Florida, during COVID and when things were all disrupted, we were really conscious about keeping the suppliers healthy and paid and keeping their workforce strong. And I'm really proud of what we were able to do by working with some of those smaller businesses. We do have some even family-owned businesses who are in the supply chain, and they've got some maybe more unique struggles because they might not have as broad or diverse of a customer base. So when I mentioned that communication with the government, the same goes true to every single partner that you work with, and small businesses are really important. Frankly, and maybe you've seen this as well, it's the relationships. It comes down to the people and having those close relationships, not just treating companies as a number or a product or part. They really are people, and supporting resources, funding, infrastructure, etc.
Awesome, thank you. And so getting back to the workforce piece of it, recruiting and retention in the industry is a hot item right now. So what are your thoughts on hiring and retention practices, and how are you meeting those related challenges?
Talk about demand. Right now is like the hottest market for space ever. And I've lived through a couple of great highs and lows in the industry. I love that there's so many opportunities for people, regardless of what level you are in, what stage of career you're at. Now, that said, there's so much demand. It's really hard to fill positions, and the competition for talent and the different diverse points of view is really hard. And in today's, when you have low unemployment, now we're getting into high inflation, we're getting salary inflation too, and we're doing it to each other. If one company has a need and they go recruit from the other company and give a bonus, and then somebody else recruits them, and the next thing you know, nobody can even afford to work in our industry. And especially when you're working government contracts, you have approved rates, and it takes a long time to catch up with those expectations. So it's great to be on the job searcher side, because there is more, you can ask for more when there's more talent in demand. So with that said, oh, and by the way, I've joked with some of my colleagues who want to hire some of my people. I say they're going to steal some of my people, but then we're like, I do it too. To each other, but would it really? I don't know. In the end, I think it's not about the money. If you're getting paid well, and I do think our industry pays very well for the work that we do. It comes to that mission where we first started. And that everybody is so passionate about space, whether it's national security or civil, or waiting for the new images from James Webb Space Telescope, exploring Mars, whatever it is, there's a great passion. So most important for talent is a good fit, good cultural fit, finding an organization or creating one if you're a small business that has the right feel, the right spirit, if you will. And not every culture is right for every person, but there is one that is right. The trick is finding one right for you. And I think we're creating our culture at Airbus U.S. as we grow and hire and scale. We've got a lot of new people joining our team. They're fabulous. Just the excitement. One of our new program managers is sitting next door to me right now. I went in, there was, stress and stuff going on, and I walked in and I'm thinking, oh, does he wonder, what he got himself into? And I said, how's it going? It's like, oh, I'm having so much fun. I love this. And I'm like, oh, it's great. It's exactly what you want. So that's what I want to do is provide a good environment, and especially one where you can mentor and support each other, make sure people have the resources, make sure they can learn and grow, contribute, etc.
Excellent. Well, there's a great question in the chat here about that. The question is, are there any opportunities for non-engineers? And I think you were talking a little bit to this, but like project managers, strategic initiative, partnership folks, commercial innovation.
Oh, I would say absolutely yes. There's a perception, and actually I get this question asked a lot sometimes when I talk to students who wonder, well, what if you don't like math and science? Does that mean you can't go into space? And I'm like, no, anybody can go into a field that you like. You don't necessarily have to have that technical background. So yes, today we need program managers, subcontracts managers, supply chain, IT, security, facilities. There's a lot of opportunity for non-engineers, and we are hiring, by the way. So feel free to check out our postings. But just in general, that infrastructure that you need for any space project. Having engineers is just one part of the team, and people who bring, and actually even people who bring different perspectives from their background. We've one of our new hires just started last week, came from the oil and gas industry as one example, and so there's kind of the knowing of your domain, and then there's the knowing of the particular functional area that you're good at. So absolutely, a lot of opportunity throughout the industry. Oh, and also legal, policy, sales. I think there's something for everybody. If you're interested in space or in satellites or any other kind of capabilities that we've talked about, there's lots you can do.
Awesome. Well, appreciate that. So you're talking about diversity of thought and background. What about international collaboration? So in partnering with allies, as the last panel talked about, is important with current operations and things like that. Where do you see bridges, and how can the U.S. government use those bridges most effectively? Airbus being this is the U.S. entity based business, but can you talk us through that?
Yeah. So, I had mentioned earlier about industry sometimes being the bridge among different customers, the Army or Space Force, for example. Well, the same can be done internationally. And I like to think about Airbus U.S. in our U.S. government national security role. We can link across many other countries. And JADC2, the interoperability, that plays to our allies as well, that we can communicate with each other, use each other's systems, share data where it's appropriate, leverage each other's technologies for the greater good. And that goes even to space exploration, partnerships for the moon and for Mars. So I think collaboration with friends and allies is really important. It's part of how our nation works internationally, and balancing that to understand how to work when you've got you have to work around things like export control, and you have to understand obviously things that are classified or country specific. Then you get more into the so-called Five Eyes partnerships and NATO programs, and also to understand. So there's a perception of conflict of Buy American, and well, that means you only work within the U.S. I mean, our supply chain is global, and with friends. It's not with bad guys. It's a global supply chain of friends and allies, and it's a good thing. It keeps us healthy as among our allies, making sure that we've got capability across the world. And frankly, there's just some things that are better done together, where one country can't afford it alone, where you bring different pieces together. We've seen this in commercial airplane production. That's happened for a long time, pulling together different parts of F-35. Zephyr, we have right now a stratospheric aircraft right now, solar electric unmanned system that came out of the UK. We brought it over to the U.S. It's on its way. It's started out in Arizona and is on its way flying across the world as another example of a joint program. And space exploration. We're eagerly waiting the launch of Artemis, so NASA's mission to the moon. And the European Space Agency is actually, it's the first time NASA's picked a major, had a major industry partnership for a lunar program. And Airbus in Germany is building, or they have built, the European Service Module for ESA. They give it to NASA. NASA hands it over to Lockheed to integrate on their Orion capsule, and then that will fly on the Boeing SLS. So cross fingers that will launch later August, September timeframe. So, it transcends
borders. Yeah.
Borders, exactly.
Yeah.
Literally,
awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I welcome the audience to ask more great questions in the chat, and while they're populating that, our next panel that they're going to be talking about is a variety of technology companies. And so I'd ask you, Debra, how are new technologies in the industry changing the way we think about space-based solutions?
Ooh, there's so many fun technologies. I would start with, I'm a big systems thinker. So I like the field of systems engineering and how you pull together different technologies or systems of systems to enable something great. The edge computing was talked about in the last panel. Design to manufacturing, where you think about how your design can be manufactured, and they were talking about on-orbit reconfigurable payloads. What enables that? How do you build something so that when it's on orbit, it's going to morph into something else? Laser communications, a lot of demand for laser comm, or that technology has been around for a while, but really operationalizing it, pulling into constellations. And I mentioned earlier responsiveness, and some of that is in technology, but a lot of it, maybe more of it, is in the mindset of imagining the missions you can do and what are all the ingredients you pull together, including the contracting mechanisms, the call-up mechanisms, that standards and the flexibility that's required to actually do that versus just talk about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to interview you today. It's been my honor, and I see David back on the screen, so I think that's my signal to toss it back over to the studio.
Thank you, Sam. So it's huge, very fun. I appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for having me again. David, yeah, now I can see it. My little screen just popped up.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Appreciate you doing this. Sam, thank you for moderating. Oh, and by the way, edge computing, yeah, you guys need to talk. Absolutely. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. It was fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you.